So if anybody thought I was short before, I'm extra short now. I'm all legs and very short from the torso up, so I look like a midget sitting next to Ed. I look like a midget sitting next to my wife, and she and I are the same height.
There you go. But long legs you got.
Yes.
Well, cheers.
That's why I could dunk at 5'8".
That's it. We're going to see which of us can still do that at 40. Neither of us are close at the moment.
I'm not taking that bet.
So, tonight, over a glass of VINwiki, which I hope that you'll enjoy at the link in the description below, I posed the question to Doug. Today, which manufacturer has the best vertical lineup of cars? Historically, if you wanted to build a vertical collection of supercars, you would use the Ferraris. Do a 288, F40, F50, Enzo, now a LaFerrari, and now even an F80.
LaFerrari Aperta just kind of confused things.
Well, so did the Icona cars. And, today, if you wanted to assemble that collection of cars, you'd be looking at probably $4 million for a 288.
At least, yep.
2 to 3 for a nice F40.
It's 3+ for a nice one.
Holy cow! Okay,
Yeah, I know.
The F50's 5, and
Yep.
maybe a soft 5 now.
Unfortunately for me.
Because that would easily be the one I'd take. Is it an Enzo still 3 or is it 4?
I think it's 3+.
Goodness gracious. All right. LaFerrari 3 to 4.5 for an Aperta. And the F80 is now 4. So for all of those, you're pushing $20 million.
Yep.
And there are a lot of people that have the entire vertical, or that will once the F80 gets delivered. And, in thinking about that, especially with the rise of not only the different generations of cars, like Pagani bringing out, but not just a Zonda, but you've got a Huayra and a Utopia, Bugatti's Tourbillon, you're starting to have multiple generations of really significant cars from a lot of brands. And certainly as the collectability of Lamborghinis has grown up, I think there's an argument to be made. So my question to you is that if you were going to spend that same 10, 15, 20 million imaginary dollars that we don't have on building a single manufacturer vertical collection of cars, who do you think is the one to go with?
Taking a step back too, before a couple years ago, we only thought about this in terms of Ferrari. Ferrari had the supercar set.
Right.
And the supercar set was very important because if you wanted to get a new Ferrari supercar, you had to, at the very least, have the previous ones. And thinking back about the values of them is incredibly depressing, right? I remember 2 specific instances where I bid on a set or was offered a set. And again, it was imaginary money for me. It was, do you have a customer that can pay more than this? But in 2012, plus or minus, there was a set which was not including the LaFerrari, so it would have been the 4 at the time, 2.8 million for all 4. And then recently, I think it was maybe 2019, there was a set not including the LaFerrari, which would have been available, but it was again the 4, and I think we offered around 8 million. Which was seen as a very big offer at the time, and the F50 was not even original paint, and maybe not the F40. So to think of them, again, take the LaFerrari out of it, and think of them, that's doubled since 2019. How much farther can that go? We don't know. But it's depressing to think about it in hindsight of what could have happened.
In terms of how many of those collections could be assembled, the 288 is the limiting factor, 272 produced, the F50 not far behind, 349, plus the post-production prototypes or whatever. But, now we're going to have 799 F80s, plus probably another 250 Apertas at some point, you'd imagine Ferrari would do. So,
and over 1,000 F40s.
Right. Now, Porsche and Lamborghini would be the 2 brands that have grown up the most in terms of collectability in the last decade. So what is the Porsche perfect highest end collection? So these are not 911s. I mean, obviously you have 959 Carrera GT and 918, and then maybe a Mission E, I suppose, is coming. But do you add a 911 GT1?
Absolutely.
Okay. And how much is a 993 GT1 now?
10 million plus or minus. There's so few of them and so few that transact that it's tough to put a number on that.
Okay, and so so let's just say it's 10 plus a couple for the 959, the Courage GT's 1, 2 if you want the greatest one that exists, and a couple for so you're at 16.
Yeah, you're approaching 3 for the greatest 918 that exists. Those
wild.
have been...
Yes, high mobility. So similar-ish money to buy. And I don't know, what does having that level of Porsche collection get you in terms of access to events? I mean, nobody's really dying to feature your F40 at a concours because there's 1,000 of them. I mean, versus your 911 GT1 gets you in anywhere. Your 959, there's classes of those showing up places.
But Porsche is also... They had the VIP program for the 918, and that would get you any new GT car and limited production car like the Sport Classic. But let's be honest, anything since the 918 that you would get is a 911 bodied car. So it's just a lineup of special 911s. So it is not the access that Ferrari has given you in terms of the ability to spend more money with their company.
Right. That's very true. That's very true. And, I mean, theoretically, if you looked at all the cars you could have gotten, and if you flipped them then when you were allowed to under the VIP program, is it 18 months, 2 years? Depends
on when. Some of them were 6 months. Some of them were longer.
Okay. So you would have had the chance since 2013-14 to have gone through your 991.1 GT3, your .1 and .2 RSs.
911R.
Yep. So could you have paid for your 918 with the premiums that were available to you on the VIP eligible cars?
In theory, yes. But if you flipped all of them, I guess you would have had your 918. I think you would cease to get them.
Yeah, at least
even if you were within the technicality of the rules. I think.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. All right, so let's think.
But your 918 would have paid for itself anyway with the appreciation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And probably wouldn't have broken in the same way that your P1 or your LaFerrari would have in terms of needing a new battery. Let's think about the Lamborghini lineup. So if you started, you probably don't worry about a 350 and 400, but let's just say you started with a Miura SV, $3 million. Then you get a great Countach, could be a Periscopio, could be a downdraft, could be whatever, or you could chase anniversary cars and run all the way up, which would be a very interesting approach. But let's just say that you buy, what today is probably a $1.5 million downdraft would be the ultimate, non-anniversary downdraft car. Then Diablo GT or SE30 Yoda, 2-ish.
2 for a GT, 1 for a Yoda.
Like you can buy $1 million Yoda anymore.
One just sold from Rally Road for $1 million. That's one of the best ones out there.
Nah, it was not one of the best ones.
Let's just say 2 for a GT.
Fair enough. I think that's the way you'd go. And then Mercy, it'd be hard to say you're going to be able to buy one of the 5, maybe 7 manual SVs. So let's just say you're buying a manual 640 or an SV, depending on your preference of what's best, which is, 1 to 2, give or take. And then Aventador, kind of pick your poison. You might buy an anniversary car. You might buy an SVJ Roadster, Ultimate. Any of them you can buy for, $750 is as much as you'd ever need to pay.
Wouldn't you buy a Reventon, though? I mean, that's the
a great
level
question.
Of supercar, because even in discussing this, you're talking about the Lamborghinis. You're going, well, which kind of special model of that model do you buy, which already differentiates it from Porsche and Ferrari, which have a specific model that is a supercar.
And that's a detraction from Lamborghini in consideration, because it's hard to say that you have the undisputable ultimate Lamborghini collection, which is fair. And then, you got a Reventon coming. There's nothing special there yet. But then, do you want a Veneno? Do you want a Sion? Do you want all these other Centenario things that you could have? And that's tough. I don't know. It would be much easier to just go anniversary cars and do a 25th, 30th, 40th, 50th, 60th were nothing interesting. But that to me would be, if you walked into a garage and somebody had one of everything, that would be baller. Yep. And I've never even seen a really good picture of all of them together up to the Aventador.
Speaking of that, I mean, let's talk Corvette anniversary cars.
I mean, for pennies on the dollar, you could have all of them.
All of them.
And of course.
And the pace cars and the whole
So could you do the McLaren? Because you have to have the F1.
I mean, well, if we have a $20 million budget, that gets you the F1
And a loan for the rest of the F1. Well,
and a PT Cruiser.
Look, I think if you really went out and wanted to spend 15 on an F1, I think you could buy a car today.
Would anyone sell you one? Come on.
There's people that have 7 of these things. I mean, yes, somebody would sell you a car for 15. I believe that. There was a really good car floating around.
I would like to borrow 15 mil. Anyone want?
That's it. Interest only for the next rest of my life. And then instead of retiring, I'm going to work forever, and I'm going to have my McLaren F1.
And just no interest payments, transfer on death title.
All right. You could buy a P1 for 1.5. You could buy a Senna and a Speedtail, maybe even an Elva, and have room for a W1. If you could buy
Which is patently just ugly. I'm sorry. It is
not the strongest representation of the brand identity, shall we say. But I would take that. If I was able to achieve it, even with rough versions of everything, I would take it over the Ferrari lineup for sure. Would you? Of course you would.
I feel like there's a backwards argument here. I know we're talking about vertical supercar collections, but supercars really started before we defined them as supercars. I know most of them are mid-engine cars, right? The Ferraris are all mid-engine production street cars. You could say a Ferrari 250 GTO or any number of those early cars were quote-unquote supercars. So if you're doing a McLaren collection and you have enough money to buy an F1, what if the F1 was the pinnacle and you went backwards and you bought race cars?
Right. Which would be incredible. And but I don't necessarily think that is...
It would be the ultimate McLaren collection.
Well, for sure. But even if you just had those, you could say that you had the ultimate collection. Because once again, I've never even seen a picture of somebody's garage that had all of them. It must exist, but nobody's out there driving their Speedtails because they're at home with their little magnet battery connector. So, as you think through that, I think it's probably achievable, and I would have a really, really hard time arguing against F1, P1, Senna, Speedtail, W1. I mean, that is death strong. And you could even throw in an SLR if you felt like it, and
your daily driver.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And let me now. All right, but what is the Mercedes lineup?
Oh, so to that argument, we've had discussions. Of course, as car guys, we always create scenarios because if you just say, "What's your dream car?" Okay, that game gets old very quickly.
Right.
Certain budget, limiting garage spots, whatever. But I propose the one make, unlimited money collection. What brand would you pick? And a lot of people pick Porsche, Ferrari. Mercedes was my pick because not only are they the oldest car manufacturer on the planet, but they have probably the richest and most diverse racing history. So even though a lot of their new cars are old man commuter cars,
sure,
they have
so many
wealth of amazing cars for the last 100 years that you could pick a way cooler collection than anybody else. And every billionaire out there that's a Ferrari collector or a Porsche collector has essentially duplicates of the next guy that has them.
All right, so what are the pinnacle Mercedes? You'd go SSK, Gullwing,
CLK GTR.
Yeah, which is...
But there's a few in the C111.
Yeah, but I mean, that's priceless, arguably.
Okay.
But I don't know that you'd have to have one to say that you got there.
But you could have one.
And you could run all the Black Series if you wanted, but that would almost be like adding your 911s. But I mean, an SLS Black is a hard car to argue against having in there.
Sure.
I have an SLR. Obviously, you got an AMG 1. And there, all right, if you add all those up in ultimate versions, you're in that same 15 to 20 ballpark.
I would say at least
again,
that.
I still think that's better than the Ferraris because the CLK GTR is so darn perfect. Terrible to drive on the road, but awesome and worth having.
I think my decision would come down to the pinnacle car in each collection.
No
right?
question.
Because there's one of each that is our ultimate dream car, right? So McLaren, you go to the F1. Ferrari, for me, is the F50.
For Lambo, for me, it's the Mercy, but I like
For me,
them
it's
all.
the Diablo GT.
There you go.
Mercedes, for me, it's the CLK GTR. Which of those could I not live without?
Although the Zonda, a great Zonda, if I could have an orange Cinque, it would be a comfortable car to use, to drive, to love. It would shut down any event you ever took it to, and you could really accumulate a lot of miles on it without it ever costing you $500,000 to put back on the road.
But could you put Pagani in the Mercedes category?
Not budget-wise, because that Cinque is worth $20 million, and so you'd have to buy a weak Zonda, a Huayra, and a Utopia to be able to get there. But you could certainly argue there to add an SC30 and a 25th Countach because Horacio designed them.
All right, now we're getting a little...
That might be a stretch. It's probably like
little bit of a
the
stretch
Mercedes category, but that to me is a pretty formidable idea as well. You could run the whole Koenigsegg lineup, run a CC8S, CCR, CCX. CCXR is the same thing. Some Agira, Regura, Yesco, CC850.
I feel like that would be less exciting. It's definitely not diverse. It's a very homogenous collection.
Yeah, the experience of enjoying them would not be like getting from your F40 into your F50. But, if you asked the young automotive audience, I think there's an awful lot of them that would check that box awful fast.
Yeah.
They've probably never been in one.
But that's also kind of like the modern McLaren collections.
Right.
Anybody with money can go buy anything they want from McLaren.
Yep.
And it gives you the social media clout, but what is this really about?
So we covered Ferrari, Porsche, Lambo,
BMW.
Mercedes. We have not talked about BMW. Pagani, Koenigsegg. What would you buy from BMW, Doug?
It wouldn't necessarily be a supercar collection, but it would be a good...
Really?
It would... It would be a good collection from, if you take social media clout out of it. Right?
Eric
so
Keller was on to something.
I would argue, I would rather have a pinnacle BMW lineup than a modern social media clout millionaire lineup of like McLaren's. If you take the F1 out of it, right? The things that money can't just buy. BMW 507, BMW M1, BMW Z8, BMW Nazca C12. That was a gorgeous, gorgeous concept car.
Right.
You've got a decent
lineup
there.
An amazing lineup of wonderful automobiles. But if you said, hey, fellow kids, my dad has the greatest collection from a manufacturer. It's worth $20 million, which it obviously wouldn't be because you just buy everything 3 times. But he's got a $20 million car collection. Would you like to come over and see it? I'm not going to tell you what kind of cars they are. And he opens up the barn doors and it's all BMWs. You think that kid gets to go back to school the next day and not get laughed at?
It's not what it's about.
You're right. We're taking
it is absolutely not what it is about.
No.
If you ask, I have never in my life seen a BMW Nazca C12. I would love to see one. I would love to own one. I think that's one of the greatest concept cars on the planet. It's one of the most usable concept cars on the planet.
Maybe.
You can't argue with BMW power. BMW V12 powered the McLaren F1.
No, we can't argue with that.
Yeah.
It's a good power plant. But again, I don't think we're at any risk of you pulling that lever in this imaginary game.
For less than 10 million, you could have
everything.
A killer BMW collection.
That's very true. That's very true. And people would ask, when are you going to sell all of them and buy something cool? But I get it.
Cool as defined by whom?
Everyone.
You have to have a certain refined taste to go get those BMWs. It's not something that just money can buy.
Well, that is very true. Yes. So who else merits consideration? Ford.
Yeah.
You got obviously GT40, GT,
Shelby,
Mark II,
427 or 289 Cobras.
100%. You know, and you could justify really, I mean, a GT500 or a GT350 were the supercars
Hold the
of their
phone.
day.
Hold the phone. How much would it cost to buy the GT90? Is there a number?
Surely there is that, you know, something between 5 and 10 million has to buy the
Sure.
car, right? So if you went out, like, I want to have that level of indisputable, like Daisy, the Shelby concept that Curated just sold. Yeah, if you decided to put $20 million into Fords, you could have a Rockstar collection.
And that would be pretty cool.
And even
just to
Ford
have the
versus
GT90.
Ferrari idea, yes. But, you know, to have a real, and I mean, look, for $20 million, you could have a Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3 GT40.
Not race winning.
No, but
you
back
could
to the
have
pack car. Yeah.
Yep.
Test car, whatever. I mean, you could have them.
I wonder what the number is on that GT90 in Oklahoma.
Do you wonder? Yeah.
I do.
Yes, I'm sure, but not that it would.
I'm sure Ford, you'd be in a bidding war with Ford.
Yes, because it is privately owned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Ford's a good one that I had not thought of.
It is. Yeah.
How about Chevy? Well, back to the Corvette at full circle.
Yeah, but I mean, there's plenty of people that have that.
We can pass right by Chevy.
But we got to talk for 20 minutes about BMW. Yeah, I
What
agree.
Corvette has ever been made that's better than a BMW 507?
None of them. You'd be the worst person to be on the other side of that argument. Yeah.
And there's nothing supercar about them. They're all similar. You can do a special version of a Viper, but what do you get? But beyond, I got an ACR. Well, I got an ACR Extreme Aero.
I've got a 101 color.
Yeah.
Yeah. 104 airbrushed. Dude, that was the best thing about today. All right.
Hold on. Back up, though. Let's talk about the Chrysler brand.
Okay.
Forget Viper.
If you get an ME412, I'm here.
Yeah. Chrysler made some amazing concept cars. So maybe they didn't make real supercars production-wise, but they made some absolutely fantastic concepts in the 90s and 2000s.
No question.
And if you took that lineup, the Chrysler Atlantic, the Dodge Copperhead, the ME412, some of those...
That motorcycle.
Oh, yes, the...
4 wheels.
Hammerhead, not... what was that thing called?
I don't know. It was awesome.
Yeah. I'd love to have that kind of power between my legs.
You can only dream, Doug. Only dream.
It was miserable to ride, though, from the video. I mean, it was a straight line.
Yes.
Yeah. I think you could assemble a very cool collection. It would not be anywhere near the level of the real production supercars of the rest of the brands we're talking about.
No.
But you could have a very cool
collection.
Concept collection.
I like that.
Things that were never made that should have been.
Mm-hmm.
And you could have a PT Cruiser Turbo. The world's best ever.
Wood panels.
Other than McLaren, we haven't talked British yet. Aston Martin.
Oh, yep. Full DB series.
DB AR1.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's where we'd start.
Yes.
Coolest thing they've ever done.
We'd start with a DB one.
Yep.
And you just do the... Yep. There you go.
And all awesome. And then you get to the more modern stuff. You could probably end up with some Bond cars in there. I mean, if you're really trying to spend $20 million.
But you could have a Valkyrie and a Vulcan and all the Vs.
Yes. Yeah. And
DB1. What's it? No, sorry. The 177. That would be a pretty strong lineup.
I mean, especially when you consider the quality of the vintage elements of the lineup. But, I mean, if you start doing a Valkyrie Spider and a 177. I mean, you would not be able to buy cream of the crop everything, but you'd be talking about trying to buy 20 cars.
Sure.
And so, you may decide that really you only need a DB4, DB5 as the high points there.
Sure.
Right? But you could justify all of them for sure because they're all insane in their own right. What about Bentley? I mean, obviously, the super old stuff, nuts, as cool as it possibly gets. The more modern.
They made some great race cars, but did they ever really make a supercar?
No. I mean, yeah, certainly.
There's no Bentley that would get you into any. There's no Bentley newer than 1960 that would get you into any event on the planet.
No, but man, if I could have a blower and a blue train, that would work for me.
Jaguar?
For sure.
You'd have to start very early, but you could have an XKSS,
Yep.
a D-Type, a C-Type, XJ220.
Yeah,
I mean, come on. Who doesn't love a 200-mile-an-hour V12? I mean, twin-turbo V6.
Get an XJR15.
Yep.
The Jag lineup is strong. You get that concept that they ran in Spectre, that orange car that floats around and gets sold for not enough money all the time. I think it's awesome.
That would be a pretty compelling lineup.
Yeah.
Nothing exciting in modern times.
No.
Completely lost their way.
Yeah, taking the year off, Jaguar.
Yeah. The decade.
Yep.
Century.
Yeah, they've just been mailing it in. But,
Yep.
Okay. What are your, let's just say, top three?
Ferrari, because F50. Call me crazy. I have to eliminate McLaren because the only car I want in their entire lineup is the F1. And I would not enjoy owning any modern cars. And the alternatives that other manufacturers offer in terms of the diversity is far greater.
What if it was F1 T50S?
Ooh, you pulled the Gordon Murray card. That would be compelling. That would be very compelling. So we're just Gordon Murray. the Gordon Murray lineup.
Murray, yeah.
Okay, fine. Gordon Murray lineup would be in the lineup.
Yep.
Mercedes. That would be my other one.
Okay.
What was my first one? Ferrari. Yes. Ferrari, Mercedes, Gordon Murray. Amazing that one person
is that influential on particularly people of our age in terms of great cars.
It was the mustache and the mullet.
I would say the Gordon Murray lineup number one. I would still say McLaren number two. If I could find a cheap enough F1 to have enough cars to say it was truly a collection, I who knows if I'm ever even going to get my Speedtail out of the garage, but I'd put miles on the Senna and I'd put a lot of miles on the F1 and I would justify it. I gotta say Aston is really compelling.
Mm-hmm.
Curious to see longevity on some of these new things that they're doing.
It would be the most beautiful collection out of all of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I love Lamborghini, and I am not going to sleep on Bugatti here. If I could have,
fair enough.
I mean, certainly if I had 3557 and went all the way EB110, great Bayron, great Chiron, great whatever is the best Tourbillon.
You are also talking about a $50 to $100 million investment for that lineup.
You can buy bits of 35. One just sold an RM for $400,000. The 57's a problem.
Yes,
you might have to. You might have to go with dud 57 in the lineup. But the rest is pretty. Yes. Oh, absolutely. There's some unloved 57s. I mean, they're not all going to be Ralph Lauren's $100 million car. I do recognize that. But I mean, I'm not going to buy an Atlantique. You'd have a heavy set of cars right there. You don't have a lot of manuals, which is a thing, but same as some McLarens. And so I think, if I'm honest, it's I can have the GM8 thing, or we'll call it McLaren 1, then I gotta say, yeah, I love Aston, I love Lambo, and I love Bugatti. In there. I mean, it's not that there's any bad options if you start spending $20 million on their cars, unless you go BMW like a moron. But I think that, I think it's a fun exercise. And I like that Ferrari, which would have been the only list, isn't on mine because everybody else has made such great stuff.
Yeah, Ferrari is still on mine because if you take each individual one, you look at the 288, it's amazing. You look at the F40, it's amazing. You look at the F50, it's iconic. There's nothing like those lines. Enzo is, looks like a Lego repurposed into a real car. But, the old stuff is really good. I would probably take BMW over Lamborghini. Very controversial. I know Miura and Diablo, but none of the modern Lamborghini stuff appeals to me. It all got ugly after the Diablo. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a valid point. Are you going to spend any time in your Aventador or your Revuelto?
No, I'd park them. I'd sell them so I didn't have to look at them. I put covers over them. But a 507 and a Z8 and an M1 and a C12, I mean, come on. Beauty.
I'm calling M1 a beautiful car.
It's
cool.
It is. And they're fantastic to drive.
So does that mean that your second favorite car of all time is an F50 to the F1?
I would enjoy looking at an F50 more than an F1. After seeing numerous ones of them, the F50 is more of a draw for me if it was I'm going out to my garage to look at. At that level, it's not necessarily about the driving experience because they're so far beyond my
pictures, Doug. And I've never seen one of you in an F50, and I've seen several that were you in F1s.
Because that was so iconic. I had built it up. There are so many statistical reasons that an F1 is better than an F50. But an F50 is better looking. And the last few F1s I saw didn't do anything for me. Because it's like Pappy 15, right? You build it up to this thing because it is the greatest.
As good as that VINwiki that you got.
Exactly. And statistically, it is the greatest. The F1 will always be the greatest car that ever existed. But I'd rather have an F50. And I'd much rather have an F50, an F40, a 288, and a LaFerrari than an F1 and all the garbage that McLaren is making now. Garbage.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Doug Tabbitt on the world of automobiles. Buy your BMWs now.
M6? It's a great car. Shark knows one, not the new one. The SMG crap.
That's right.
No.
You got to have it. It's wonderful. All right. Let us know in the comments how much you love your VINwiki and which one you pick.
Cheers.
Successful car purchasing is all about knowing your buying power and being able to move quickly. And the best way to do that is getting pre-qualified with Premier Financial Services. Call one of these numbers, speak to one of their representatives, fill out their application, and then you'll know exactly how much car you can buy. You'll approach a seller, tell them you're already qualified, you've got your simple lease set up from Premier Financial, and you'll be able to close very, very quickly. That's why Premier is one of the most powerful partners in the world of exotic car financing, and that's why I turn to them every time I go out and try to buy something crazy.